Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is
Stephanie Peñate.
Thank you for joining me again. You've been on here already, but I wanted to continue my just tirade and fury about the U.S. immigration system, and not to kind of it's not to say that like I'm just gonna like shit all over it, but also I'm just sort of pointing out how these sort of systemic failures contribute to a great deal of suffering and maybe even some sort of economic loss for the U.S. government and the rest of the U.S. economy. So this is something that's worth discussing with someone who has a slightly different immigration experience from myself, which is that you yourself were born in the U.S., but you're dealing with your parents' immigration experience. And so I guess, first of all, tell me about that, your experience as the child of immigrants and sort of being a first-generation American for your family.
Yeah, well, I am here to completely shit on the entire system. My experience as a first gen has been, I don't really know how to, I feel like when someone asks me that, there's not like a word to describe it. It's just really, it's taxing for everyone involved. I honestly don't know. Have we talked about like why my parents actually migrated here?
Not on the podcast.
Oh, okay. My parents fled during the Civil War in the 90s. I think my history is a little rough, but the Civil War was like 80s, 90s, most predominantly in the 90s in Salvador, through U.S. sanctions, which is a really common theme in a lot of countries who have a lot of refugees. But my dad's story is a little bit, I've never actually sat down and talked to him about it, so there's a lot of like gaps in it. But he migrated here when he was really young. My grandma used to work in sweatshops, sewing clothes, and he was brought here at a really early age, and he was able to get some kind of visa through that. My dad was born in '69, so I'm not sure when that happened, but he was able to go back to El Salvador and come back. And he did that pretty often. And one of his trips back to El Salvador is when he met my mom and they started dating. My mom became pregnant at the age of 19 with my older brother, in a very conservative Catholic household. So she was kicked out by my grandma. And she was like, well, I guess this is the time for me to, finally like move to the United States with some guy I barely know in a country I don't know anything about, in a language I don't speak. So she came by foot. Like she walked through the deserts. She slept in the deserts. And in Spanish, I believe they're called coyotes, which I think is coyotes in English, which are basically like the people who lead immigrants through like the trails because they know the trails. And it's an expensive process. Recently, the last person we did that with, because we have a lot of family that we are able to help pay for. This is really long.
No, it's fine. This is your story.
But last time we brought someone over, it was $13,000 per person to do that. And most people don't have $13,000 like in their bank savings accounts for that stuff. And my family's always been really adamant about like, we are a family and we all care for another. So, like here's $2,000 or here's, what I have. Pay me when you can, whatever you can do. And I would like to note that they give you a price per person, which is really messed up. And then they can be like, well, I want more money. You owe me $2,000 more, or we're going to leave your family here for like ICE, basically. And then you have to come up with like that $2,000 or your family is like toast. But back then it was a lot cheaper. I wouldn't say it's affordable because it wasn't, but it was more affordable than it is now. And my dad brought her that way. And I've never actually spoken about my older brother, but through some people, they forged a passport and they snuck him like in a car across the border. And he was really young. I think he was either like 4 or 6. So he is an immigrant who went through. He didn't really go through the system because he didn't have to apply for DACA. He didn't go to college, but he has married a white woman, and that was a stressful process for both of them, and of course, especially for him because he got stranded in El Salvador because his lawyer said he did not need a piece of paper that he did need, and when he went to El Salvador Customs, or I don't know what they're called, but we'll just call them that. They were like, "Well, you need that, so we can't help you." So we had to get that over to him, and I think it was some celebration. I can't remember what it was. So they were closed for like 2 weeks to celebrate the festivities. So he was delayed by 2 weeks, and then just the whole thing like another 2 weeks. So he was there for a month longer than he anticipated. That was his experience. But other than that, it's been pretty easy on him. And then, like I said, both of my parents are immigrants. My mom, she has her residency now. I was able to vouch for her through that process once I turned 21, and I'm 23 now. But my dad's is a completely different story, and I think it's going to be a family thing because my dad got into some trouble with the law when he was a lot younger. They basically revoked his, I think it was residency. I don't think it was a citizenship. I think it was his residency. They revoked it, and basically he is well, my mom isn't anymore, but growing up, both of my parents are technically illegal and like not in the system and stuff like that. My mom differed a little bit in that I think in the early 2000s, I don't remember what president, but there was a president that passed or that authorized work visas. And she had I think it's TPS, a work TPS. So she was able to work. I have a lot of family that is illegal, and my family has always been really hardworking and has always, like, the reason they came here was it's expensive to be in El Salvador. They have the same prices on food, on everything that we do here, but they get paid $5 a day. So that's like a gallon of a gallon of milk, which is like not sustainable. So most of my family came over here, honestly, to make money and to be able to like survive. And a lot of my family right now has found ways through the system, through the good hearts of and the rare hearts of employers to be able to work as illegals. And we find ways to work under the table too. But that was a really long way of saying it's stressful.
Yeah. Well, your story and your family story is one, I'll say that I greatly empathize, and I'm sorry that you and your family have to go through all of that. But like your story kind of contains it all, like all the different ways in which you can sort of navigate this thing. And so something that is worth talking about, and I don't know if it's just my brain space lately, but I've just been thinking in like greater systemic points of view. And so like, why does someone need to migrate from a country? Why does someone need to migrate to another country legally or illegally? What causes someone to break the law? Why would they have to go through these avenues? Why would they decide to, screw up their life per se by trying to make it into the US illegally? And so these are the sorts of things that people don't necessarily have to experience if they're born here or if they have never known anyone that has had to go through this. And so these are the sorts of things that get left out in discussions of immigration policy and the human beings that are going through these things. Instead, the immigrant, and usually the undocumented or illegal immigrant, is reduced to just that, a number that is a crime and therefore no.
Yeah. I can answer both of those really quickly too. Getting a visa to come work here is incredibly difficult and it's expensive. Even a work, like just a temporary visa to visit for like a week or two is so incredibly difficult. My grandma, we've filed for her so many times, and God bless her heart, they know her by name at the El Salvador Customs, but there's so many hoops you have to jump through for that. And illegally, I'm not going to say it's easier because it's not. I've had family detained by ICE. I've had people detained at borders of of Mexico, like entering Mexico and also just exiting Mexico. But the sad thing is that is more reasonable and like more possible than it is to get like an authorized piece of paper that says this country gives you permission to leave for X amount of time. And to give you like a story of like why people leave, my mom, I hear her talk about this all the time. When she was in school, she would walk to school as a kid and see dead bodies on the ground. And, you know, at that age, she kind of understood what was going on, but they played a game of like, all her and her cousins of like, who can run the fastest across these bodies because it's scary. So let's run and see who gets to school first, and whoever wins gets a pan dulce, or you can have my Coke or whatever. When I think about this, people who obviously don't understand the whole backstory and like the process, and then like post immigration or post migration of immigrants, it's so hard because they lack so much understanding, and I don't think, and I'm going to be honest and say all my family that has had to migrate is way more stronger than those people. And I think they can endure more than those people because they go through so much. It's not, you don't just wake up one day and you're like, yeah, I'm going to spend 3 weeks in the desert in 100-degree weather so I can be debated on Facebook of like whether or not I deserve to be here. That's, you know, it's everybody's right to be wherever they want to be in regards to land or cultures or anything like that. But, you know, it gets complicated.
Yeah, it is incredibly complicated because, I mean, obviously there is the counterpoint of like, there's only so many people that like supposedly a country can handle. So like if, I don't know, 7 million people in the United States decided to migrate into Canada, that is a thing that their systems cannot handle. And we have to sort of navigate ways in which we can solve these problems in a pragmatic way. And sometimes people get left behind, people get abused, and people get ignored by the systems, in some ways trying their best to solve those problems, but in other ways, the systems are deliberately making decisions that cause harm or that limit people's ability to obtain legal status or whatever it might be. Actually, as you were telling the story of your parents and your family, I was actually thinking that I don't think I've actually said specifically how my family actually like came into the US. I've always just stated that like I came to the US in 2001. But like, so we came to the US on a visitor visa, and we overstayed that visitor visa. And so like we flew into the US. We didn't like, you know, cross any rivers or go through the desert. And, you know, and like I explained in the previous episode, is that my experience is extremely privileged. Like the fact that I got to fly into the US and have some form of legal status for a little bit.
Bougie.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm the bougiest of the migrants. But like the stuff that I had to like go through as a child is nothing. we just like got on a plane, gathered the things, and then like as far as I knew, it was like, oh, like we're going. Okay, cool. I'm just following my family around, and then just, oh, we're in a different country, and then, oh, I'm getting enrolled in school, and oh, I'm like, so I was just a bystander in all of these things. I didn't get to choose any of those things that happened to me, but like the fact of the matter is that that's one of the simplest ways of sort of becoming an illegal immigrant. You just come here as a visitor, and then you continue visiting forever.
Yeah. I have our compadre, it's basically godparent of my brother. Yeah. The godparent of my brother, he has been able to get work visas pretty well. I don't know how. That's not to say that he doesn't work. I mean, like, I generally just don't know the process to get that, or what he was able to do to get it. But he's done that several times, and every time he's done it, he literally does work. That's like all he does when he's here is work, and he works about 2 jobs, about 60 hours a week when he's here, just so he can take money back to his family. But the fear in that is he goes back when he's supposed to, and then sometimes he'll overstay. And the fear then is that you will be like detained in ICE because they can deport you to them, because the laws of that are really gray and up for interpretation, which is scary. But yeah, I know a lot of people from Venezuela too. My dad has a lot of Venezuelan friends. I live and grew up in Norman, and there's a bunch of them in Norman and Moore. And a lot of them came on work visas too, with everything going on there.
The interesting sort of nice, I guess, or like the silver lining that comes through this is that people find community in the places where lots of us gather. And so we get to share in this experience, this very strange experience of coming to a country and being in some sort of strange status with the government. And so there, as far as my like bougie experience goes, it is that like there has always just been this like underlying paranoia of, if I am too forward facing or in the spotlight or anything, I will be seen, I will be reported, I will be deported. Like, and so that's a systemic fear that I've grown up with, and I've lived with that paranoia all my life. And so we're creating sort of generations and entire demographics of people that are incredibly paranoid and don't trust authority, which, well, I mean, we like don't trust authority in general anyways, but go ahead.
The punk in me is screaming. But no, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is something I don't know if it was just me or if it was my brothers too. They never really expressed this, but I always had the fear that my parents would get deported. There's never a single day in elementary school, and I'm not exaggerating, because I remember distinct moments of having this thought. But I would have genuine fears that when I walked home, my parents wouldn't be there. I didn't walk home by myself, but like when I got home, when like my parents picked me up, or I had a large support of uncles and aunts helping my parents out, and them helping them now. But I had other people pick me up, like my aunts and my uncles, and it was really weird. It was really real to feel that like if I got home, my parents might not be there, or if I got a call in the office at school about like changes in pickups or whatever, because my mom had to stay at work, or whatever reason it was, and somebody else is going to pick me up. The first thing that I would think is, did my parents get deported? What happened, and something that we also experience in the community is we are through, I don't know how people find this out, but like sometimes people will be like, ICE is on X and Y street, and like they are. So, you obviously avoid that street. You avoid it because a lot of immigrants don't have driver's license, but they have to drive to work. And, I think that experience is one that you understand with everything going on recently with your driver's license and everything. But it's a really big fear. And there was like a time when I was able to drive where it was bad down near Norman that I was just driving my mom around because she was too scared to drive. And it's a big fear. I mean, I spent a lot of time just thinking I was overreacting or that like, that I was just overreacting. But like in the reality is like white people or people of status. We say in Spanish, it translates to status. So you just have like a citizenship. But if you were born here and don't have to worry about that stuff, that's like genuine stuff that you don't have to experience, but other kids do. And it made me bitter for a long time. And honestly, like I'm 23 years old and I'm still trying to undo all that bitterness against like people with, and I have my citizenship because I was naturalized here, but it's still something I'm like, I don't know. It's something I like, it's a very touchy thing, but for me, but it's also just like other people don't have to experience it. And the fear that you feel is very real.
Yeah. Getting to, I guess, more of the like systemic discussions in it. I recently read this great, awesome, terrible, awful book called Hitler's American Model, which is...
You read the whole thing?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
It's actually, so fun fact, hey, here's something about systems that you can trust, which is libraries. And you can sign, like if you have a library card, there's this app called Hoopla. And you can get ebooks and audiobooks and music as well and movies. And if you have a library card, you can sign up through Hoopla and you can get, like, they have a pretty vast library of things. And hey, Hitler's American Model is in that library. So yeah, every once in a while, you know, someone will tell me a book and I'll check if it's on Hoopla. And a lot of times it is. So yeah, check that out. But so like, you don't have to pay for an Audible subscription. Isn't that great? But like, so yeah, I listened to the audiobook of Hitler's American Model, and basically it describes how the like Nazi regime, Nazi Germany in the precursors to when they actually took full control over Germany, and as they were developing their legal systems to exclude a specific population of theirs and make them second class or even non-citizens in their eyes, systemically in a legal way, they looked to the United States and how great they were doing it at the time. And they were definitely inspired by the US. So, you know, it's good to know that America, you know, with Charlottesville and the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, America has a strong tradition of inspiring Nazis. So
that happened the day after my birthday. Happy birthday, Steph.
Yeah, I guess. Fun story with that. I was actually, through a weird set of circumstances, I was in a gun store in Bethany.
Oh, yes, you had like put in Discord.
Yeah. The day of. And it was one of the strangest, like, most tense feelings that, yeah, anyways.
God, yeah. I think anyone in Oklahoma who's not white is like, oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the Nazi book, America likes to inspire Nazis as much as they might like to ignore that fact about themselves. And so eugenicists love the United States. And so like the book was separated into two parts. One was immigration policy and the other was miscegenation or like blood law policies. And so since we're talking about immigration, I'll talk about the immigration policies. So going as far back to the Naturalization Act of 1790 in the U.S., it declared that only people of white descent were eligible for naturalization. Then there's the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which, you know, is pretty self-explanatory. They prohibited all immigration of Chinese laborers. And then the Immigration Act of 1917, it restricted immigration by imposing literacy tests on immigrants, creating categories of inadmissible persons and barring immigration from just the whole Asia Pacific zone. So categories of inadmissible persons, what does that mean? Like people who have some sort of like mental disorders or disabilities or anything. So like, nope, not you in the US. And then the Immigration Act of 1924, it got rid of the Asian immigration ban and instead set a quota of 165,000 people for countries outside of the Western Hemisphere. And so it's like, okay, we're being slightly less racist. And so like Hitler praised the US's immigration policy. And they were like, the Nazis were inspired by the US's race law. Eugenicists love the US.
Yeah, I was listening to the podcast that you sent over, which I think I told you. I read parts of that book, the Nazi book, because I didn't realize at the time, but I had a really badass professor at OU from my US history class. And she had us read like Boarding School Season, which is basically letters of Native Americans who were stripped from their families, put in boarding schools, and the ones, I don't remember if the book contains letters from the ones that went missing or the kids that just were like, who went through the entire process and then, got out. I read that, and we read excerpts of the Nazi book. Yeah, and the podcast you mentioned opens up with, even the Nazis were like, what the U.S. is doing is way worse than what we're doing, because they were basically killing people, but the U.S. was somehow erasing the roots. Well, not somehow. The U.S. was erasing the roots of the people they were enslaving, which was like something that we talked about in that class too. And I was like, that class day is so clear in my head, and I think about that all the time too. And it's like, we are somehow worse than the Nazis.
Yeah, well, there's this distinction between sort of physical, like murderous genocide and cultural genocide. And so the way that the Nazis were sort of like being humane in a way, in that they're not doing this sort of like stripping of entire humanity and forcing people to like live in a society that hates them. They're instead just murdering them systematically. Instead, in the US, they're like, no, we're going to kidnap you from your families and put you in these boarding schools and beat you if you speak your original language. And we're going to enslave your people. We're going to make sure that they have no way into the actual system and systematically make sure that you are completely second-class citizens. And that is a different kind of genocide, which is complete cultural genocide. The U.S. genocided the Native Americans, genocided African Americans, and in the same way, like, this is something that needs to be discussed more often, but like Hispanic, Latino people are Native Americans. And so even as far back as like Columbus's time, we were also genocided. And so we're this strange in between where we're mongrels, according to this Nazi book. We're mongrels as far as like we are a mixture of Native Americans and mostly Spaniards. And so like that's why like on like the census and whatever other forms that you're filling out, ethnicity is separate from race, because Hispanic is like somewhere in between, and it's like, I don't want to put white, so like,
yeah, you should have a podcast where we just talk about Latinidad, because it's messy, and it's intentionally messy, because the foundation that it's like founded on is just, it's stupid. For lack of better terms, it's stupid.
Our history was erased. And so, and the same goes for African Americans who don't have an experience outside of whenever they were like their ancestors were put on a boat, and anything from before then was completely erased from them. And so, yeah, it's one thing to just be like murdered by a system that hates you. It's another thing to be forced to live in the system that hates you. So, but okay, so getting to US as it is now, like all these things are awful, but like, you could say, oh, well, we're not like that anymore. We've since 1960s, we had the civil rights movement and we're done. Racism is over.
Racism is cured. We're cured.
Yes. But like I said before, eugenicists love the U.S. And for whoever is listening that doesn't know the definition of eugenics, I put it in my notes here, which is the study of how to arrange reproduction within a human population to increase the occurrence of heritable characteristics regarded as desirable. So it's like, yeah, like if you want your child to have blue eyes, you want both of the parents to have blue eyes, which is like, you can do that with like dogs and horses and stuff. But if you like, then you're doing it with a human being that has to like live and exist. And so like, no, don't like, you have to murder the people that are mentally handicapped, or murder the people who are dark skinned, or murder the people who have any sort of traits that we don't like, or we have to make sure that they do not reproduce. That's how eugenics works. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of disability activists and advocates that I follow, like on all my social platforms, that eugenics is still a very strong conversation within their community. Disabled people face so much medical, psychological, and just like everyday effects of eugenics directly and indirectly, and it's fucked up. There's no other way to say it than it's fucked up, and it's still very prevalent. And just how we think about things too. And there's a lot of undoing that we have to do that we don't realize stems from eugenics. Yeah, and at least something good that might come out of like the conversation, the greater zeitgeist of, I guess, the 2010s and onward, is that we're sort of, as a generation moving forward, we're sort of acknowledging the existence of spectrums rather than like binary classifications or even just specific boxes, but like everyone is on some sort of spectrum. Everyone is in some ways like, yeah, there's a spectrum of like how depressed you are or how mentally ill you might be, or like just mental health in general, and all of these sorts of things to show that like even just the notion of eugenics is based on incomplete information, because like everyone is a little bit of something and everyone has a little bit of something, because human beings are a wide array of people and we're not just boxes to be ticked, but we are, fully, completely variable people. Absolutely. I don't know if you have a response to that, but yeah. But, no, I don't. Okay. Sometimes I wish you would just read affirmations to me. Like, I'll just give you a list of affirmations that my therapist gives, and you'll just read them to me. And I'm like, yes, this is so true. Well, sure. I will try to balance those out with the other like terrible things that I keep listing about, like how the U.S. inspires Nazis. But anyways, how the immigration policy still applies to now is that there's still remnants of eugenics in the current U.S. immigration law, like in Form I-693, the Report of Medical Examination and Vaccination Record. Like, yeah, sure, you don't want to bring infectious diseases into the U.S. That's understandable, although as if the people of the U.S. actually cared about infectious diseases, as is evidenced by... you said it. Yeah, like the vaguely gestures and everything. Yeah, the fact that only like 50% of Oklahomans are vaccinated. Yeah, so, okay, but like, checking for vaccines is cool and understandable because we want to make sure that diseases that are very treatable are treated and, eradicated with this wonderful invention that is the vaccine. But,
the difference is like they check for specific diseases in this medical exam that I had to, be a part of, and like everyone that tries to apply for a permanent residence in the US.
Can we talk about how expensive that was too?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's so expensive. I think the physical examination, I think we paid $250 it was either $250 or $500. I don't remember, but it was so ridiculous. And I don't have any words at how ridiculous it was. We were able to get some of them at our local health department, which are like libraries are so revolutionary. My mom was able to get like half of her vaccines that she needed, and like half of the exams she needed there for free, and we're insured. But it was just, oh my gosh, it was so ridiculous. And they give you a list too of like three. There's like three in all of like Oklahoma City metro area of they're certified to do that specific exam, and they just ask you like, are you hurting anywhere? Are you mentally well? Which is super vague. At least that's what our experience was. And my mom was like, yeah, I feel fine. Sometimes I get headaches. And the doctor was like, okay. And then we just walked out. It was so stupid.
I think I remember like one of the questions on the list is, have you ever like thought about dying or like killing yourself? And I was like, when I was a teenager, but like who doesn't? And like the woman doing the exam was like, oh yeah, totally. She's just like, moved on.
Yeah. I think the doctors themselves kind of see through a lot of like the bullshit of the system and the procedure. It wasn't a procedure, but you know what I mean? The doctor we had was super chill. And I kid you not, I was like tearing up because she was just going on, like, she went on a 5-minute nonstop rant where she just talked about how, like, at the time their 45th president was still the president. 45th president. And she was just like going off on how terrible he is and how stupid he's treating like all of the immigrants. And she's been getting an influx of immigrants like throughout that term of his presidency because a lot of people were scared.
Yeah. Yeah, so they check for like weird nonsense. So like they ask about syphilis, gonorrhea, tuberculosis, leprosy, mental disorders, and drug abuse, to name some of them. By the way, cannabis and CBD are considered inadmissible and must be in sustained remission in order to be classified as Class B or whatever. So it's like, even though weed is legal in many states, it's still like, well, because you have marijuana in your system, when we did this medical exam, like, we won't let you in the country, even though it's legal here.
Yeah, my mom tested positive for tuberculosis. She didn't have it, but she tested positive. So she had to pay like a $50, $75 fee to be retested for, like, I can't remember if they had to do x-rays or not, but it was $100. That's what we had. It was $100 fee to get retested just to make sure she didn't have tuberculosis, which tuberculosis at the time was actually going around here in Norman.
So that's actually a funny thing, because there is a vaccine that is given in different countries that actually like has tuberculosis or whatever. And so like a certain test that they do for tuberculosis, and people who have had that vaccine, it will show positive in that. So everyone who they check for tuberculosis has to also get a chest x-ray to show that they do not have active tuberculosis. And so it's like the scar that I have on my arm here is like from Venezuela, is like, yeah, I had vaccines when I was a child, and that's what, like, so yeah, I had to
have that same scar.
Yeah, I had to do that chest x-ray because my test for tuberculosis came back. So yeah, so something else to note is that like the things that they check for, syphilis and gonorrhea, like, so we can't let you fuck in the United States because you're going to bring your terrible third world diseases, which like syphilis, the US actually gave black men syphilis and then refused to treat them. This is like an actual fucking thing that happened. And so it's like, why are you keeping us out of the country for like a thing that you actually like actively gave actual US citizens?
Dead ass. My 21st birthday, I was in the lawyer's office trying to figure out what we had to do. And she gave us like the list of vaccines you need. And I just like looked at her and I looked at my mom and I just started crying because I was like, so my mom can't be sick, but every other stupid American can. And she looked me dead in the eye, tears running down my face. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, in tears. I was so frustrated. I was like, that's not, I don't know how to tell you. My mom's been here for like 30,000 years. And she would have given it to someone if this were the case. Like, why does it matter now, you know? My mom's married. She wouldn't have done that, but you know.
Yeah, exactly. But like, so these are the things that like we still have to do. I still had to do this in 2019, and people are still having to do this medical exam. And so it's not to say that like, again, checking for vaccines is not necessarily a bad thing. We don't want to bring other infectious diseases. There are infectious diseases that occur in specific places throughout the world, and that makes sense. But like, so the place that I actually got my medical exam from is actually a place that specializes, it's in Edmond. It specializes in travel to specific places and make sure that like people have all of their checkups before they go to African countries or, you know, some sort of jungle type space, so that they make sure that like, hey, these kinds of diseases that don't really occur in the US, we want to make sure that you're safe and protected from whenever you go abroad. And so, yes, there are specific things that like we do want to check for, but also mental disorders, like, again, super vague, but it's like, if you're depressed, you can't migrate to the US. If you drink a glass of wine every day, does that count as alcohol abuse? Does that make someone inadmissible to come to the US? It's rather, you know, vague, and it's very, you know it when you see it sort of legal policy, which, you know, is that quote in a legal context is an actual thing that a Supreme Court justice said. So that's dope. Not about the medical exam. It was about porn. But yeah, so like, okay, so all of these things about the immigration system, and like, yeah, it was more specifically just talking about that medical exam thing, but like they also have us check for like an affidavit of support, which makes sure that like, oh, you can't come into the country if you're going to be like a weight on our welfare system. Which, okay, I guess, but also like there's millions of people in the US that want to be on the welfare system and aren't, for many convoluted reasons as well. So it's like, for us to have to provide like $2,500 for all of these forms and tests and stuff, I think we'll manage.
Yeah, and another thing to note is that a lot of immigrants will not seek social service resources because of document status, and also just the fear of being deported, because some places may ask for your document status, and the fear of being deported that is really real. I can't confirm or deny that it's happened before because I don't know, but you know, it's a thing. Anything having to do with government or system, I think most people who are immigrant status would not go towards too.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a remnant of it in myself, in that having lived without any sort of like health insurance for a long time, like even though I have health insurance through my wife, I actually like am still averse to like any medical anything because it's like they're gonna like figure me out or something. But it's like it's not. I have medical insurance, but I'm still like averse to like doing those things because of that, you know, immigration trauma. But anyways, so like thinking of ways, and something that I said in the last podcast is that like what happened to me is like I'm very lucky to have the support system that I have. And so what they put me through would have made anyone else become a criminal. That's like the most blunt way I can put it. Anyone else would have just turned to crime. And going back to kind of the story of your family is that whenever people aren't presented with other options, they turn to crime. We have been looking for ways to do this thing legally. We have been looking for ways to make money so that we can pay for things to do things legally. But like, it's almost as though the system is encouraging us to break the law.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So like, yeah, in the way that like you mentioned your grandma, like she keeps trying to do the legal route and like they keep denying it, or it like costs an exorbitant amount of money. And so of course, like you said, you have a higher probability of getting into the country and being with your family if you go through these coyotes. And like, yeah, it sucks, and they will extort people and you'll go through terrible abuse and you have to fucking walk through the desert. But like, hey, at least I'm in, as opposed to being stuck back here where, you know, literally walking next to dead bodies every day. And so the options that we're given aren't great. And so it's like, hey, I would like to not live in this country anymore. And also I have some family that lives in that country over there. So is there some way that I could, you know, make that work? And the system goes, do you have this amount of money? Are you a fucking genius? Are you a athletic miracle? Because, you know, we'll grant green cards to those people as well. Is there a U.S. corporation that wants to have your labor specifically only after checking other job listings and like making sure that an American citizen can't fill this position? That's actually one of the things that like a company has to do. They can't just hire someone who they want to work for them that wants to obtain a green card. They actually have to, like, before hiring this person, they have to check and like basically put out a job listing like normal. And if someone else takes the job, then they will deny immigrant a green card. So yeah, these are ways in which like the system is egging people on to do crime.
Yeah, and that reminded me, my mom. So my mom brought my brother when he was like a kid, and on the application is, did you bring another person against their will? That's not the specific question, but it's something along those lines. And she obviously had to say yes because she brought my brother and he was filing at the same time. And that is a crime. That's a severe crime because it's human trafficking according to the application. And there is a real possibility that she would have to like go present in court and ask for pardon. They never really told us if that would include like fees or anything, or like what other ways that would look like at the time. But I think about that a lot.
Yeah. And I think even in my interview, the guy like went through that weird list in the middle of that form that's like, have you have you committed an act of terrorism? And it's like, look at me, dude. But like, yeah, one of the questions was like, have you worked in the U.S. illegally? And, you know, in my mind, I'm like, yeah. And so he's like, well, you put in this form. No. I was like, well, I worked with my dad for a bit. And he was like, eh. So it's like when you're interfacing with a human being, they're easy and willing to be like, oh, no, like, that's not what we're talking about here. But like, you know, they give you this list of things that you have to say no to unless you're trying to be honest on a government forum. And it's like, have you ever committed any crime ever, even without your knowledge? And it's like, yeah, fucking everyone. You've probably gone at least 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, but like, you know, I'm still not going to say yes on that form.
Yeah, the questions are like, have you ever used a bathroom? And it's like, who hasn't used the bathroom? Come on.
That's suspicious. Hitler drinks water.
Stop. Hitler drinks water. Oh, no.
But like,
he doesn't now because he's dead.
Oh, sure. Hitler, well, I don't know. I'm sure his corpse probably has some sort of, like, absorbs some sort of liquids in the ground or whatever. Anyways, what would be some ways in which, because so earlier I mentioned that if millions of people tried to migrate into Canada, it would be a very difficult way to try to process all of those people and all that sort of stuff. So like, how do we deal with the fact that people are just trying to come here legally? And the question then becomes like, can the system handle this many people coming in? And I think just right on face value, yeah, totally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We have the money to like solve homelessness too. There is countries who have solved homelessness to a great extent. And we are like one of the richest countries. We have every resource to do it, but we're just choosing not to do it. And I mean, to answer your question too, I know you're not looking for an answer, and this isn't like a plan on how to fix a problem, but a lot of it just comes down to U.S. sanctions. Like a lot of people argue that communism doesn't work, and I think a more fair statement would be communism doesn't work because you will be sanctioned by the U.S. at some point. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, let's, take a nice long look and research U.S. and CIA, FBI affairs in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Yes, it's appalling. I remember reading about it and be like, this is not true. And then I was like, this is very true. And I was like, this makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah. And if we can actually look at, the state of foreign affairs of basically the rest of the world and go like, oh, did the U.S. have some hand in, implementing some sort of insurrection or propping up a dictatorship or propping up some sort of rebellion or some sort of assassination or and it seems as though, yeah, maybe.
Yes. I laugh because I can't bear the pain of all of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, just fucking Central and South America and just the state that they are all in is in part due to U.S. policy from in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So we can't say that like, oh, well, why are these people from these shithole countries coming into here? Like, well, maybe we should ask the question, why are they shithole countries? Why are the places that they're in so inhospitable and so uninhabitable that they have to move to someplace and make the impossible decision to, either risk death in their home country or at least risk being illegal in the U.S.?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've got some documentaries I think you'd like. One's about Cuba, one's about Palestine. And the other ones, I can't remember what the other one's about, but I think you'd like them. Remind me to send those to you.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, you know, of a fun phrase that keeps getting tossed around nowadays in a less than favorable context is do your own research. Well, you know, here's some topics to research if you want. The system, quote unquote, can't handle this many immigrants, although they are already here. There's so many undocumented and illegal people in the US right now who are trying so hard to do things, quote unquote, the right way. And the system is not letting us. And so the people are already here. They're already working. They're already like the food that you have put in your mouth today was touched by an illegal immigrant. I'm almost certain of it. So like everything, you know, the whole system runs on undocumented workers. That's, you know, the immigrants taking your jobs are us, but also maybe you should take a look at the corporations that are the ones that are willing to hire those undocumented workers instead of pay an American person to do it.
Mind you, that immigrants are also taking the low-paying jobs, which happen to be like those cook jobs, mainly kitchen jobs because nobody wants to work in the kitchen. But when you're an immigrant, your job options are very limited. So you'll take what you can get.
Right. It will also farm labor, working out in the fields, working in slaughterhouses, working in like doing all the stuff that like
in 100-degree weather.
Yeah, that white people are like, oh, I could never do that. Yeah.
Construction, road.
Yeah, your nice, shining, bright pool in your nice, ritzy backyard was probably built by an illegal immigrant who is trying their best to work.
Wait, Santiago, didn't you work in pools too?
At the time, I was not an illegal immigrant.
I retract my statement. But no, yeah, my dad has done, oh my gosh, he's done everything. He's done construction. He's done like truck trailer stuff that nobody wants to do because it's a lot of heavy lifting. My parents have done like every stereotypical immigrant job that you can think of.
Yeah, my mom still cleans houses.
Yeah, I have we're living with a family member who that's what she's been doing too.
The stereotypes kind of exist for a reason.
If you need your house cleaned, you know who to hit up.
Yeah, right. I know how to clean a house very well because I also spent many years in my youth assisting my mom cleaning houses. So like, yeah.
I did too. That's crazy. I say that's crazy as it's as a stereotype.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I mean, like, we're literally breaking our bodies trying to live here and do things the right way and like just fucking pay taxes. Like we're paying taxes anyways, but we're not like gonna receive any of the benefit of it. So like all of these illegal immigrants are paying taxes in the form of sales tax or, employers are probably also still withholding it because they're like wanting to count their like how many employees they actually have while still never actually giving the benefits to those undocumented workers. So like, all this shit, all of this pay is coming out of how much they get paid and goes directly into the system, but never comes back to us. Also, there's this thing going on that for some reason right now, there seems to be a worker shortage that for some reason people don't want to work because they realize that getting unemployment checks during a pandemic was far more profitable to them than actually working a terrible job that pays them shitty rates. If only there were some population of people that actually did want to work and are trying their best to work and will even put themselves in harm's way, like, in harm's way as an example, like a COVID-19, perhaps a Delta variant. Yeah. But these people are, willing to work maybe if there were some way for these people to get hired and go through some sort of legal immigration system that would allow them to be hired, then there wouldn't be as much of a worker shortage.
What I would also like to clarify, though, a lot of immigrants don't have a choice to not work because we aren't able to get, I say we, I'm not an immigrant, but immigrants aren't able to get like benefits and they're able to apply for things out of the reasons that we talked about earlier, why people don't do taxes or may not do taxes or may not seek services. Yeah. Yeah, it's been the biggest thing too, and it's a huge reason why Black and Brown communities are at higher risk because we're working those jobs. Because we're working those jobs because those are the jobs that are available to us, and also just the quote unquote unskilled labor that goes into it, and also we don't have other options, or we have very little options.
The difference then is that like we have a problem that we're looking at right now, and we have a potential solution to that problem. Like, hey, look, no workers, but actually, hey, workers that are trying their best to be legit. If there were some way for the system to change and allow these people to be legit, make it easier for them to be legit, then like, because we don't want to turn to crime. We don't want to work illegally. We don't want to be under the radar. We want to do like, we just want to fucking live.
And that, that even brings up the bigger scope of like, why are some of these even considered crimes,
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, like, as I mentioned before, weed is legal in some states anyways, but if you are filing for a green card, it's not legal in the US, basically. So why is marijuana illegal and treated as a Schedule 1 type drug and enforced so harshly when people are doing it recreationally in many places in the US? So, and we haven't even touched on jails and incarceration because that's the other big can of worms, in that there's tons of immigrants in jail that also just want to do things legit, or people who have just been tossed around by the system that are somewhere in between. And yeah, I mean, let's not pretend that crime isn't a thing. Obviously it is. But systemically, we have to analyze the reasons why people commit crimes. And if there is an incentive to commit a crime versus an incentive to not commit a crime, then we want to make systemic ways in which it's easier for someone to not commit a crime, and therefore not be an additional person in the gigantic monolith that is the prison system. But yeah, I guess that's a conversation for a different podcast, probably.
This has been like an hour of just like, fuck the US, at least for me.
The thing is that, so I recently went to Mount Rushmore with my parents-in-law. The thing about Mount Rushmore is that it is a monument to people that have done immense things, and they are complicated. They're complicated people who did complicated things, had complicated lives, and they did some good things and some not good things, and some things that were considered good in the time that they lived in and are no longer considered good by today's moral standards. I think of the US in that way. The US isn't all good or all bad. There are good things about it, like the fact that I have lots of friends here and I'm married to an American. My whole life has taken place here. And so I'm not willing to say that like everything about the US is bad and I hate it, because that's just plainly not true. But it's complicated. And there are some good things and some bad things, and every person, every country, everything has some shades of light and dark. And like we were mentioning earlier, everything is kind of a spectrum. And so there are aspects of the US that I like very much, and there are aspects of the US that have been detrimental to my life. And unfortunately, I can't have all of it and it all be good. But I'm here and I have to make the best of it. Any final thoughts on your end?
No. I stand by my statement.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Steph, for doing this with me, for sharing your story, and hopefully other people get to empathize with you and your experience and our experience, and maybe we can, have more people do some sort of research into the topics that we have discussed. Where can we find you and your things and support you and your things?
I don't exist anywhere. I no longer exist on any social media platform.
Well, where can we support the things that you advocate then?
That's a good question. There's, since we're speaking about immigrants, there's I am rich now. I'm just kidding. I'm making pretty decent money at the current job I'm working. And I'm able to allot some of it out to organizations that I support. And there's 2 that I've been able to donate to every month. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to do it. And one of them is a book club / space in Los Angeles called All Powers Book Club. It's basically like a not strictly commie or socialist led, like it's not just communist and socialist, but it's predominantly communist and socialist event space where they hold like documentaries, information sessions, mutual aid events and stuff like that in Los Angeles. And you can find them on Instagram as, I think it's All Powers Book Club. I'll give you the handle. And then there's another one that I have so much respect for. Basically, they're like a shelter for refugees, specifically at the border of Mexico and Los Angeles. And they take in immigrants and assist them with medical needs and shelter needs, food needs, educational needs, and stuff like that. While also, every now and then, I don't know how often they go out to do this, but they go into the desert and leave like food packs and water for people in the area. And they are called Border Kindness. And they are also based in California. So a lot of the companies that I follow are based in California because that's a high percentage of immigrants that stay in California and also just coming into the United States because it's close to the border. And I will give you links to those too. Those are the 2 big ones that I've been following a lot of the work that they do, and I'm always extremely touched by all the work that they do.
Yeah. I'm not under duress, but I should say that I have no allegiance or loyalty to any sort of organization that promotes or supports socialism or communism in any way. There's some reason why I'm saying those words out of my mouth.
Totally fine. You don't have to be a communist or socialist to support people doing well. I would just like to say that for anyone who needs to hear that.
But I specifically, Santiago Ramones, have no loyalty to really any organization whatsoever. But also in this specific context, a socialist or a communistic type organization. For some reason, I'm saying those words out of my mouth.
I should also probably be saying those things out of my mouth, but to be fair, I don't care anymore.
Anyways, Steph, thank you so much for doing this with me and doing this little, emergency podcast so that I have something to post on Thursday, but also just so that we can rant about the things that we're upset about.
Yeah, and I'm always upset at something, so feel free to hit me up.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much. I'm Santiago Ramones.
And I'm Stephanie.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music and produce audio. I have an EP, a short album, that is streaming everywhere right now. It's called Soundbites. The music you're hearing right now is from Soundbites. Listen to it on Spotify, Apple Music, and anywhere else you stream music, or buy it on Bandcamp, because a single purchase is the monetary equivalent of streaming it all day, every day, for a year. I'm also working on another album, so if you'd like to hear that at some point, you can buy my music, or you can support me on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Santiago Ramones. Follow me on Instagram to stay up to date with all the stuff that I'm doing, both at bit.depth and at Santiago Ramones Music. There's also a Discord server in which we discuss deep topics from the podcast, but it's also a community of beautiful human beings. Go to santiagoramones.com/Discord to join. If you like the podcast, leave comments on social media, leave reviews by saying how much you like the podcast, and tell your friends about it. I really couldn't be doing this without you, and I am so very grateful to continue doing Bit Depth for this long. Thank you so much for listening to and supporting Bit Depth. I always end the podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Love never fails. It's going to be okay. I might be wrong.